Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. I wanted to chat with you a little bit about some of the information that's in the free ebook on my website. There are 4 steps that you can use to transform your life through story and personal narrative. And today what I wanted to do was go over the first step, which is recognizing the stories that we tell ourselves. How do we do that? What are some prompts that we can use and get an idea of where some of those stories may come from, whether they're internalized narratives or whether they're external narratives that have been imposed on us. But before we dive into all of that, I wanted to basically share a brief story from my own journey and talk about that a little bit. For many years, I believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I didn't wake up one day and decide to believe that. I absorbed it from my surroundings and my environment. As a young child and young adult, I received messages from all around me: family, religion, culture, politics, and society. Some of these messages were spoken directly. Others were just implied, or you had a sense that they were there, but they were whispered. Together, they created a powerful story, however, about who I was supposed to be and who I was not allowed to be. As an LGBTQ plus person growing up in a conservative environment, I came to believe that I wasn't good enough and that I wasn't worthy of the same love and dignity and acceptance as other people. The strange thing is that I didn't recognize these beliefs as stories. I thought they were facts, and I thought they were the truth. It wasn't until years later, though, through reflective writing, that I began to see that those beliefs were, in fact, false. I could see them on paper, and I could view them more objectively instead of subjectively. They weren't unconsciously going through my mind as a pattern. I could actually externalize the information, the story. I could name it and realize that it wasn't my story. I could, for the first time, I was able to step back and ask a simple but a very big life-changing question, which was, where did this story come from? It's really important, and that's what today's video is all about. I had to think about things like, was this really my voice? Or was it the voice of my family? My mother, for example, had a very powerful impact on my life as a young child. Was it religion? I was very religious when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and was using religion as a way to find acceptance and people that would care about me and love me. Politics also was a very big factor, and I grew up during the Reagan era in the 1980s, and the AIDS crisis was very prominent when I was graduating high school, and it had a huge impact on my life. And the fact that our government didn't respond to that crisis very effectively, it impacted my life and then those around me. Also, was it the voice of culture or fear? And a lot of those things, growing up in a very conservative environment, very homophobic, and then actually moving to a large city, which was a little different in terms of acceptance and open-mindedness. However, there were still factions of people or groups of people that were homophobic and were created fear inside of me in terms of being able to afraid to walk in certain neighborhoods after dark and things like that because I was a gay man. So that one question, where did this story come from, changed everything for me, because once I recognized the story, I could begin to challenge it. And once I challenged it, I discovered something extremely powerful. The story I inherited was not the story I had to live. I could choose a different story. And I just want to take a second and let that sink in. You don't have to live the stories you inherited, whether they were stories from your family, religion, politics, culture, wherever it may have come from. Those stories can be changed. Today, I want to help you to begin asking the same question in your own life. What stories are running your life right now? Another word that might be useful here: what stories are ruining your life right now? And where did they come from? Which is the most important piece of this. So in the ebook that I have available on my website, I talk about the 4 easy steps to transform your life. The first one being recognize, which we're talking about here today, which is identifying the stories, beliefs, and patterns running your life. I also talk about, and we'll do some future videos on number 2, which is release, let go of what no longer serves you, and heal emotional patterns. And number 3, rewrite, which is replace limiting narratives with empowering truths and new beliefs. And then number 4, which is realign, and take aligned action and create a life that feels purposeful and free. The ebook is very helpful. It has a lot of great exercises and information that can help you through this process. But the most important thing to take away from it is disruption is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your transformation. So I want to dive into a few things that you can do or look at as far as understanding your own personal narrative and where it may have come from. A personal narrative is the story we tell ourselves about who we are and how the world works. For example, I am successful, or I am a failure. People can be trusted. People cannot be trusted. Money is scarce. Money is abundant. My voice matters. My voice doesn't matter. We don't see the world as it is. We often see it through the stories that we've adopted. And I want to look at some of those places or areas where you may have adopted some of those stories. The first one being, and this is probably the most important one, the foundational area or place that you may have received a story about yourself, and that's family. The stories that we hear at home often become the lens that we see the world through because we're conditioned and brought up to believe those stories as children. Things like good children don't question authority. Success means hard work. Don't show weakness. Be grateful for what you have. So some of these stories uplift us, and some become limits that we carry in ourselves for years. We can abandon those stories. We have that opportunity. And that's how, but first we have to recognize what those stories are. The second place that the stories may come from is religion. Religious teachings can inspire and uplift, but they can also shape stories about who we are, what we deserve, and how we must live. We're often told you are worthy or you're not worthy. You are broken. You must earn approval, and you must follow the rules. Those are narratives that are imposed upon us by religion. And it's a form of control if you allow those stories, those narratives, to affect your life in a negative way and impact you. Same goes with politics, which is the third area, if you see here, it's like a linear progression. Often family and religion go hand in hand. So as you're growing up, you may experience religion directly from what your parents observe. But then as we get into our 20s, early 20s, late teens, early 20s, we may start to have the political impositions that become part of our identity. They can inform our values and shape our perspectives. However, when we tie our identity to a particular side, questioning it can feel like questioning ourselves. So whether we're right or left, whether we believe in justice and equality, or we believe in freedom and security, we have we have chosen a particular side, and we other the other side by doing that. Awareness of where these stories are coming from, these political stories that we tell ourselves, gives us the freedom to think for ourselves, not just repeat the stories or the rhetoric that we've inherited. So by staying informed and staying curious, we don't allow these political stories to create our identity. A big one that is fairly recent but very powerful is social media. Social media platforms and algorithms reinforce stories that shape how we think about ourselves and others. So it's just a logical progression that the algorithms will feed into what we interact with the most. The stories that we tell ourselves also inform the algorithms of what to present to us, so that we end up being in an echo chamber. Things like you aren't successful enough, you aren't attractive enough, and everyone else is happier. Social media creates comparison and validation and constant information creates anxiety, disconnection, and distorted beliefs. The first step is to recognize the stories that we're absorbing from social media and how we can change those stories or delete them altogether. And then finally, I have culture, which is very powerful as we become young adults. Culture is extremely important to look at. Some have called it peer pressure, things like that. I think it's an amalgam of things. It's a group of things, everything from our family narrative, our religious background if we have one, the politics that we adhere to, and also our social media interaction. All of that is part of culture, and not just the people that we may hang out with, or that we may feel are like-minded. The culture we live in creates powerful stories about what a successful, happy, and meaningful life should look like. So you may have a completely different story if you live in California versus if you lived in Arkansas, for example. Culture also tells us, especially in capitalism, that we have to hustle. We must always be working and producing and improving. And that's how we are valued by society, especially a capitalist society. We are in a comparison culture, again, in that celebrity culture as well, with social media, and thinking that if we have fame and followers, a lot of likes, that we're important, that we deserve to be alive. We compare our lives to everyone else, however, and that's where a lot of our suffering comes from. We also have, because we live in capitalism, a consumer culture and an instantaneous or instant culture where results need to be instant. We need instant answers. AI is contributing to that. AI doesn't have all the answers, especially to things that we might be feeling or thinking that are stories that we've inherited. We have to become aware of those. AI can't do that for us. And so AI and culture contribute more stress to our lives if we allow them without awareness, if we're unconscious of what they do to us. So these cultural stories are not always bad, but when we absorb them without awareness, they can pull us away from what truly matters to us. So what are the effects of these areas where your stories may come from? Well, first of all, we see here information overload is one of the biggest ones. Humans were not designed to process thousands of competing narratives every day. We also have social media comparison, where we compare our real lives to curated, highlighted reels. Then we have the political division or divide. Many people are increasingly trapped inside their own narrative bubbles. And then finally, also identity confusion, which I think is the most important one and the one that I really focus on. And that is where people often ask, who am I? What do I believe? And what matters to me? Because they've inherited so many conflicting stories and they just don't know. They're confused about who and what they are inside. The key understanding here is that the challenge isn't that we have stories. The challenge is that many of us have never examined them. So I want to provide you a reflective writing exercise, and I'm just going to give you some prompts. So I would ask you grab a paper or a notebook and a pen or a pencil, and just sit down and take 5 or 10 minutes and answer these questions for yourself, or even sit there and think about them as you're watching the video. These prompts, these questions that I'm going to ask you are really important, and they will help get you started thinking about what is going on in your life as far as the stories that you're telling yourself. So the first prompt number 1 is, what beliefs do I hold about myself? What beliefs do I hold about myself? If you remember, I talked a little bit about what it was like for me as a young gay person coming up in the late 80s, being a teenager in the late 80s, and then becoming a young adult in my early 20s. And some of the beliefs I had were that I was not valuable enough, that I was less than others, and those stories just were not true. The second prompt, where did these beliefs come from? So earlier we talked a little bit about the 5 areas that I recognize that many of my stories came from. And maybe you have other areas where you can think of that stories have originated from it for you or have been imposed upon you. And then prompt 3, whose voice do I hear when I say these things to myself? Whose voice do I hear when I say these things to myself? Often the voice in my head is my mother. And it's not as much anymore because I've done so much work in reflective writing and being aware of these stories. But my mother was a very powerful impact in my life, especially as a child and young adult. Prompt number 4, what story am I living that may no longer be serving me? What story am I living that may no longer be serving me? For me, it was getting rid of those ideas and those stories about I was second class, that I was not deserving of a better life because I was gay, and that I had to accept what the society around me imposed upon me. That certainly wasn't true. And I'm really very thankful and grateful that I was able to see that story and change it or remove it. And then prompt number 5, the final prompt. If I had written this story myself, would I still choose it? If I had written this story myself, would I still choose it? This is really between yourself and you. This is a question no one else can answer for you. You have to be able to understand, first of all, that you have these stories, so recognizing and being aware of that. But then also, do you still want to carry those stories? Would you still choose to have those stories in your life? If no, then you're in the right place. If you decide you want to change your stories or you want to delete them altogether, erase them, this is the right place to be. So my goal today isn't to radically change your life. My goal here today is to help you see your life more clearly. Awareness always comes from before transformation. You have to understand or see into what you're experiencing and what you're thinking in order to transform that. This may sound like common sense, but you'd be surprised how many people are unconscious of these questions and the need to be aware of what's going on in your life and how you're suffering uh, and how you're thinking before you can transform those thoughts. When we recognize the stories and patterns and beliefs or assumptions shaping our lives, we gain something very powerful. We have choice. That, to me, is true freedom, psychological freedom. We have the freedom, yeah, we often say in the United States, especially in many democracies, we have the freedom to vote, we have the freedom to purchase, we have the freedom to marry. Not all those freedoms are given to the same people. And that's really a fight that is ongoing in terms of making sure everyone has equal rights and equal freedom. The freedom that I'm talking about here, everyone has access to, and that's psychological freedom, where you have choice. You have the choice to change your narrative, what you tell yourself about yourself, and you have the choice to deny or reject external narratives that may be imposed on you, whether that's from religion, family, politics, culture, social media, wherever those may come from. You have the choice to say no. Once we have choice, then transformation becomes possible. Freedom is truly possible. In the next video, I want to talk about step 2, which is release. How to let go of stories and narratives, emotional patterns, and beliefs that no longer serve who you're becoming. In the meantime, I invite you to download my free ebook, the 4 easy steps to transform your life through disruption. And you can do that at drdwaynecuster.com. And you'll see in that ebook that there's a framework that we're actually starting to talk about here in these videos. And there's reflective writing exercises that can help begin your own transformation journey. If you feel this video was helpful, I hope that you give it a like and subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who may be ready to examine the stories shaping their life. If you want to learn more about my services and things that I offer, or that I will be offering soon, online courses and webinars, feel free to visit drdwaynecuster.com and check out the information there. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you later.